Hello, my name is Julia Moulton, and this is my final project, Counseling African Americans. In this project, I will be talking about the importance of counseling African Americans, essential elements in counseling African Americans, my personal agreements and disagreements about the topic, and my overall conclusion of the topic. When it comes to the importance of counseling African Americans, this group of people go through three unique life challenges. First is racism and discrimination. These disparities are different experienced by people based on gender and class, background, such that Black women, Black transgender people, and poor Black people experience greater disparities, particularly in terms of income and access to resources. Consciously or unconsciously, many people associate African Americans with crime and favor harsher punishments for African Americans. The media perpetuates a perception of African Americans as criminals. And a recent study has found that Black families were significantly more likely to be portrayed by various media outlets as dependent, dysfunctional, and criminal than their counterparts to white families. Next is internalized racism. Internalized racism is the acceptance of racial stereotypes, beliefs, and ideologies that support white supremacy and devalue Black people and other people of color. Basically, a person sees the world through a white middle class filter. They believe that Africa is not as civilized as Europe and that Black people are lazy, violent, and loud, and do not work hard as other people. They might change up their appearance or change their potential dating partner or have a particular preference in dating partner based off the European aesthetic. Next, I'd like to talk about the African American women. They go through stereotypes of being loud, angry, and on the other spectrum, they go through a superwoman stereotype where they are expected to bear the blunt of jokes, criticism, and they're just essentially told to work harder with the things that they have. Essential elements in counseling African Americans. First, racial socialization. When, what, and how to discuss racism. Therapists may decide to discuss the positive benefits of racial socialization with African American parents. The APA Resilience Initiative has produced several resources to help therapists and parents uplift youth through healthy communication about race. Most parents like to confront the idea of race and racism with their children head on because it is something that they are going to experience in their life eventually, and they want them to be able to cope with it if it happens and know how to deal with it so that way that their children are safe and protected if and when the time comes. I also want to go back to racism and discrimination. Many people already have these preconceived notions about African American families, as we just talked about. So it's important as counselors that we are checking our own bias and we're getting to know our patients individually despite race, but also keeping to account that race does play a part in their everyday life. It affects their mental and physical well-being. So while we are checking our own biases, we are also acknowledging that fact. I also want to skip a little bit ahead and talk about some of the agreements. So for counselors to work effectively with African American clients, they must be knowledgeable of their characteristics and strengths, as we just talked about. Ethnic and racial identity, spiritual and religious values, family bonds, and community ties all suggest important dimensions to consider in counseling African Americans. An important aspect of cultural competency and cultural humility in working with African American clients is the recognition of protective factors and the strengths that have allowed them to survive in an intolerant society. So I'm going to skip now a little bit ahead and say why I do agree with this. It's shown in African American culture, pop, music, media, that family is very important to them. And having that strong bond with all of it is important to acknowledge as a counselor because it'll come into play eventually. Sometimes African American people feel like they only have one another, they only have their community, and sometimes they have a distrust for their white counterparts. So this is why I agree with the aspects of counseling African American people and how to do it. In conclusion, African Americans represent nearly 13% of the U.S. population. On nearly all measures of education, employment, earnings, psychological and physical health, they experience a standard of living much lower than their white counterparts. Individual, institutional, and cultural racism accounts for many of these disparities. The life experience of African Americans affect the manifestation of psychological distress and therapeutic process. So I want to go back to talking about how African Americans have a unique challenges in their life that most, if not all, will face. They go through an experience that can be intolerable. And sometimes they have to wake up every day and walk out the house wondering if something will happen to them or what they're going to face or what someone's going to say to them just based off the color of their skin. Living a life like that can be extremely mentally and emotionally exhausting, which is why I believe that it is so important for our counselors to counsel African Americans in such a way that they feel welcome and accepted, because in most of their everyday lives, they don't get that. They don't get that when they go to the park. They don't get that when they're walking home from school. They don't get that when they're at their work. They'll face things like microaggressions, if not daily, majority of the time. So as counselors, it's our duty to make it a safe and welcoming space and getting to know our clients, not based off the color of their skin. Thank you.